Hello, everybody, and welcome to my new name, College Football with Heather. Really creative, right? But you get what you get with me. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited. I have a special guest here. I have Pete. I can't. Peter, what do you go by?
Doesn't matter. Peter's
Doesn't matter.
fine.
Okay, I'm gonna call you Pete because right now Peter is Kirk Herbstreit's dog to me. So you're gonna be Pete. You're gonna be
Yeah,
Pete to me.
fair. I will be second place to that.
Well, it's a dog. So thank you for joining us live. I'm gonna do my little spiel here. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube. Follow us on X, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. We are everywhere. We are Bougie Sports. You can follow me at Love Buckeyes and check us out at bougiesports.net. We've got all kinds of content for you. And as usual, I will be doing my weekly college football podcast. And we just added a new segment to our brand, and we are going to be talking about the Cavs every Tuesday. And I will be at the Cavs game tonight, so you'll see a lot about that. So with that said, I am going to reintroduce my amazing guest today, Pete. Pete, tell us about yourself. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us what you're doing. You are so into college football, so I am super excited to have you on with all your expertise.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. Good to be on with you. Definitely college football is my primary. Follow NFL as well. I have a lot of fun like Heather does on X. You can find me at PigskinPD there. And then I actually just started a YouTube channel with the same thing. And then I write on the side for SaturdayBlitz.com, covering all of college football, which is way more fun than just siloing to one conference, right? Or something like that. So, yeah.
So I have the website at the bottom where they can check out where they could check out some of your articles. And, I know that you are covering all of college football, but it's going to be nice to have that SEC expertise in here because I do try to cover it. But, when you're siloed for so long, So because there are a lot of SEC teams here to talk about, we're going to cover some of the upsets again last week. This season has been.
I know.
I
know. Yeah, it's the transfer portal, I think, in NIL. I'm sure you touched on that before, but it's just evening the field, parity massive. Because you think, not to cut you off, Heather, but
please do.
The biggest thing, right? I'm going to go Quinshon Judkins just because I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
Hot player, led the SEC in freshman years in rushing. With Rocket Sanders right in tow. And then last year had a bit of a dip, but, I mean, he's still Quinshon.
He's still very good, right.
Yeah. So, anyways, like he was able to, at his discretion, his decision, say, you know what? I don't like Ole Miss anymore, or it's not the right fit for me. However you want to phrase it or term it or whatever the reason was. Maybe it was NIL, maybe it wasn't, whatever. Fact of the matter is he went from one school to another overnight because he could. Because it's legal. I'm not shaming Quinshon. I think it's great for Quinshon.
The system is broken.
Yeah. But it allowed him to do it versus before, right? A guy like Quinshon used to have to transfer, sit out a year. And then he could do it. So he crushes his career, right? Because now you got no development in college besides you can still practice, to be fair, but you can't play in games. You lose a year of athletic eligibility. So if you're Quinshon, you just went from sophomore to senior without having played on the field in game action in a year and a half. Your draft stock is shot. You got to rebuild that up. Now he doesn't have to do that. If that was the case, he would have stayed at Ole Miss, right? And then you have a lack of parity. This is just one example, but yeah.
So, let's touch on this a little bit because this is something I haven't had an opportunity to touch on in some of my past pods. I think that having a one-time exception where you can transfer one time you don't have to sit out the year, I think that that's fair. I think that that's reasonable. But some of this, you're realistically, you could have these kids transfer every single year. Maybe they don't get the playing time that they like. Maybe they have a little disagreement with the coach. Maybe they're just being, immature because they are young. Whatever the reason is, some of them aren't going to be good reasons to transfer out of schools, and they'll be able to. And you have players, we're seeing this year, you have players who are deciding to redshirt and sit out because they know at the end of the year they can just go to a different school. So I'm not sure that I love the way that it's structured this time. I think that they need to do something. You need to put some kind of limit on it.
I fully agree. Bad example or good example for this is Bear Alexander.
Yes.
He was at Georgia, right?
Yes.
For those that don't know, 5-star to high school, defensive lineman, was at Georgia freshman year under Kirby Smart. He actually had was that the year they played you guys in the semis?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a great game. And then,
it was a great game.
Bear actually saw playing time freshman year, which is unheard of at Georgia. It's unheard of at Ohio State, schools like that.
Right.
And he decides, well, my playing time freshman year basically wasn't good enough. Transfers to USC, Southern California. The first thing he posts on social media is him in his luxury high-rise apartment.
Right.
So we knew right where his mind was, right?
Right.
And then
he wasn't going for, he was going for the NIL money. That's what he was going for. Right.
Yeah. So then he just transfers again, to your point. So he's killed himself, and it's unfortunate for the sport because now you got this kid that's like an afterthought, and he's not even going to be looked at. He's not developed at all, and it's just sad. Not a great game.
Brianna, it was not a great game. I agree. I agree with you. Too soon. Hashtag too soon for that. But how do you Pete, how do you prove that USC tampered? Because you know that they did. When they got word that he was going to transfer, the money started to the money offers started to roll in. How are you going to prove that these kids are being courted during the regular season? Because boosters, you can't control what the boosters are doing, and they want these kids, they want this talent. So it's just, I think that the whole thing needs overhauled.
Fully. A cap is one way to do it.
Right. A salary cap now. We're in NFL. We're in NFL. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you hear, I'm sure you saw it, rumor is Michigan's trying to throw $10 million at Bryce Underwood.
Right. And he's from Michigan, isn't he? He's a home kid.
Yeah.
So the fact that, first of all, I do not ever want to hear again that Michigan is saying how we bought our players. Every good team right now is buying their players. We are. I'm not going to deny that. We're playing by the rules. Michigan, now you've got to spend $10 million to keep your home kid at home. Yeah. Because Michigan is just a train wreck this year. We'll talk about them a little bit in the Indiana recap. I mean, if they had a better offense, I think Indiana would have lost if Michigan had a good offense.
I fully agree. That game was up in the air. Bryce Underwood, right? This quarterback. He's from there. Also, if you're Michigan, what the heck are you doing paying an unproven? I don't care how many stars he has.
No, he could have 10 stars. He's never seen a snap.
Pay Quinshawn.
Right, because they're in college.
Yes, pay Will Howard. Pay him.
Right.
He's proved it.
Right. But I wouldn't even say to pay a Julian Sayin or an Aaron Nolan, because maybe Sayin a little bit because we've seen some meaningful snaps, but not really, not really. So you don't know what these kids are going to do when they're real time.
The kicker on him, Heather, Connor Stallions, I just learned was his high school coach.
Go figure.
You can't make this up.
You can't. This is why I love college football. This is why I love it.
Asterisk season.
Right. Exactly.
That's wild.
Exactly. So let me ask you this though. With the NIL, since we're going in and we're talking about, paying players, these players don't have as much incentive to leave, say their junior year or as soon as they turn 21, whatever comes first. What is it, 3 years or 21 years old. These players don't have that. They don't have that pressure anymore because they can make that money. These good players can make that money in NIL deals. Do you think that we are going to see in, say, 3 or 4 years in the NFL, do you think we're going to see a rise in talent because these kids are staying a little bit longer and they're developing more?
Yeah, I hope there's Piggy Jane. She's gonna say,
"Oh,
hope that's okay."
So your dog, I said, "Of course it's okay." Now we're gonna get more viewers now because they want to see the dog.
So, yes. And Matt Nagy I forget who he's with. He's a Senior Bowl guy. And he was on another podcast earlier this year sounding off about just that. Yes, I think there's going to be more development because of exactly what you said. Now, NIL, players can't get paid. So the curve on it for Nagy was, I think, and this was what was projected too. If you are worse than third or fourth round, it makes more sense to stay in college. Yes. Yeah. And that's great. And he mentioned too, the reason that a lot of these guys were leaving early was financial reasons to take care of their family, etc. Now that is no longer a need because of your NIL. And he also, it showed by the numbers because it has been a few years now since NIL has been legal. I forget the exact stat, but there was a record number lower of underclassmen that were coming out in the draft this year because of exactly what you said, that NIL. And he did say, granted, if you're a first or second rounder, you're going
to go. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. was a good, he got offered the sun, moon, and stars, and why, he was going to go in the first round. It didn't matter. Yeah. And I missed a comment here. I did miss, Tommy said that the kid's committed, that he's committed to LSU, and he basically rejected. But I'll be honest with you, it goes back to what we were talking about. Commitments don't mean anything anymore. Until they sign, they're going to play that 1 year until they sign. I don't really buy the commitments anymore because there's so much waffling on it.
I've heard the same thing that Tommy said, but you're totally right. Commitments don't matter. Look at Florida State. You think their commitments are holding true right now? I know it's a bit different. Michigan ain't that bad, but on the back end of that too, if he does go to Michigan, LSU's the real winner because now they got millions of NIL freed up to disperse
for one player. And that's where Michigan, you're gonna essentially you're going to spend all your money on one player. And it's like a dynasty draft in fantasy football. You want to be careful about how you disperse your dollars there.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and I did want to get into some of the upsets that we saw last week. And my biggest upset, and I don't want to call it an upset because Ole Miss is ranked and they're not bad. They are in the college football bracket now, but Georgia, it wasn't Georgia losing. It was the way that Georgia lost. That was it was shocking to me. I mean, maybe I'm being exaggerative here, but it was shocking to me because Georgia got absolutely stomped. They did. I mean, they lost 28-10. And for Georgia to only score 10 and for Georgia to allow 28 points against, in theory, a team that is not at their caliber. Yeah. So what were your thoughts on that game?
Man, you guys saw Ole Miss's defense. It's like when they were sacking the quarterback or tackling him, it looks like a varsity player tackling a seventh grader every time.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just showing out. That was Jim Knowles vibes, right?
Right. They pressure and
Yeah. And I was wrong to credit them as well. And I'll get into what I think, but I wrote an article on it. I thought their shortcomings would be on defense because of Pete Golding, their DC.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be an offense because Kiffin's Kiffin. I think they're rounding into form. And then Georgia's got a lot of problems on offense. That coordinator, Mike Bobo, I didn't think he should have been hired in the first place at the beginning of last season.
Yeah.
So Ole Miss is rounding into form. Also, what benefits Ole Miss is with 2 losses for a couple weeks now, they are now playing elimination football.
Yes, they are.
Ohio State's not playing that. Oregon's not playing that. Georgia wasn't playing that in that game. Texas ain't playing that. They're playing elimination football, so they also have that extra chip. The other thing I think that's going unnoticed here that I saw in that game early, remember when Jackson Dart, Ole Miss's quarterback, went out for a series?
He did, yeah.
Austin Simmons, that true freshman QB, came in, and Simmons is actually a stud high school recruit reclassified, and go ahead.
They had no. I've got my thoughts. Go ahead because I have some stats on.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, awesome. So they had 90. Simmons throws 95. He's a dual sport athlete at Ole Miss. He's a true freshman. Throws 95 on the baseball team. Pitcher. anyways, he comes in and he's thought to be like the Ole Miss this offseason. Their media and fans and stuff have been touting this kid like, oh, he's the next everything, and he's looking really good in practice. And we saw it in that game, right? Dart goes out for a series. He rolls him down the field, and you saw it was very subtle, but if you were watching, there was a scene on that when Dart was out, some assistant, maybe it was a trainer, I don't know who it was, came up to Kiffin and said or asked something, and she agrees, and said, do you want to – I think it was Dart's ready. Do you want to put him back in? And Kiffin just shook his head. You saw it. It was a nonverbal no. And then you saw Dart, the camera flashed him a play later. He's got his helmet. He's walking up the sideline. I think that did well for Ole Miss because Dart and Ole Miss fans will agree to that point in the season, they were not playing well on offense. And I think Dart seeing Simmons roll down the field like that said, holy cow, I got to take it into another gear. And he did.
Well, and that can go one way or another too, because then you could have, you need to, you're testing the toughness and the mentality of Dart, because he could have easily said, I'm going to pout about this and I'm going to be a big baby and fine. Then you play him and see how he does. So that really just goes to show what kind of player he is, because he said, all right, this kid is coming for my job. I'm going to keep my job.
That's right.
So and you could go one way or another with that.
Yeah. And I think it went the positive way, obviously, right? And you can call it a double positive for Ole Miss because now Simmons is riding sky high with confidence.
Right,
when Dart does leave.
Well, and so is the coaching staff, because they know something goes wrong. True. They can put him in. I think that the tail of the game for me was more of Ole Miss's offense versus Georgia's defense, because no one on Ole Miss had more than 50 yards rushing. They only had 134 yards rushing, and they had 263 yards passing. And it was interesting. It was just interesting looking at the stats that not one player torched Georgia. It was the whole offensive unit that torched Georgia, because a lot of times you see in these lopsided losses where you have one or two players who are just firing, and you have a running back duo that has 300, 400 yards, like we're going to talk about in the Georgia Tech Miami game. They got torched on the ground, but you didn't see that with this game. I just thought that it was a very balanced attack by Ole Miss. They came in with a game plan like every coach does, but their kids executed this plan. They were ready. They were ready.
And the thing that's changed now, because they had an injury at running back, their starting running back for the year, who was really good. The names, I'm drawing a blank on it, but Ulysses Bentley has come in now. Ulysses Bentley the fourth. Sorry, he came in now.
You get it right.
And he transferred a few years ago for I think SMU, could have been TCU, and he was thought to be preseason like the guy. And then they had all these transfers. I think Parrish was the starting running back to start the year, and Ole Miss fans were like, well, why aren't you playing Bentley? Like, really just didn't understand it. Now Parrish is hurt and Bentley's the guy. And you really saw, to your point, that balanced attack. The other thing that's helping them is Trey Harris, their stud receiver, has been out for a few weeks now. It's forced them to learn how to play and distribute the ball. Yeah, because he was getting a lot of yards and stuff.
Yeah, he was.
That it was him and nobody else.
Right.
And now, like you saw Caden Lee, their slot receiver, getting stuff. And they have two good tight ends. Caden Priestcorn's back, but they also have Daquan Wright, the transfer from Virginia Tech. They weren't even using him. It's like, why did you even sign this guy out of the NIL and transfer portal? Like, and now they're using him.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think, so closing out on this game, I think that it's the beginning for Ole Miss controls its own destiny now. And Georgia, I think they're done, because they're not in the playoffs now. I do think that Georgia's done, because you have too many good teams in the SEC now that are ahead of them. I don't see Georgia coming back from this one, and I don't see them getting in.
What if they beat Tennessee, win out, and beat Georgia Tech too, and then win the SEC? Well, if they win the SEC title game,
they have to. They have to. If they can beat Tennessee, they're in. I don't think that they're going to be able to beat although Tennessee to me is like an LSU. You have all these expectations, and they're playing good, and they're playing good, and they're playing good, and then all of a sudden they lay that egg when it hurts them the most. So, well, if it stands the way it stands now, if Georgia plays the way they've been playing, I don't see them beating Tennessee.
I agree with you. Spoiler alert, we're going to get 2 upsets later. I agree with you. I'll say that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect. So moving on, this was my no surprise. It was bound to happen upset of the week, and that's Miami and Georgia Tech. And it was bound to happen not because it was Georgia Tech versus Miami, but it was bound to happen because Miami has been on upset alert how many weeks now? It feels like every single week. In the fourth quarter, I'm like, stop me if you've heard this before. Miami's on upset alert. And they always managed to pull themselves out of it, and they just couldn't. They just couldn't this week. And Cam Ward really is the reason that Miami is this good. I don't think that Miami as a whole is good. I think that Cam Ward is just really very, very good. He had 348 yards and 3 touchdowns. You cannot put this loss on him, even though, what was it? Was it a fumble? The last drive of the game, you still can't put this on him. He did everything that he was supposed to.
He's Superman.
Yes. Yeah. And you can't rely on one player.
Yeah, I agree. I fully saw exactly what you're saying, Heather. Since that Virginia Tech game, remember that Hail Mary that was not a catch? It was
I agree.
But since that game, it seems like then in Louisville, like it was a game into the fourth quarter, and then they've been skating by. We'll call it, to your point, every week. I saw the same exact thing, and I'm not saying I predicted.
No,
seems like you did them, but. Okay, well,
I didn't predict it. I predicted that it would happen eventually because of how many close games that they've had, and it seemed dumb luck that they.
It reminds me of Iowa State, right? They similar, like the past couple weeks. They pulled out a miracle win against, I think it was Utah or Colorado at home, and then
Colorado. I thought it was. Maybe it was Utah. I can't remember which one.
I forget, but it was a home game and they squeaked it out. Like they had to do a miracle with Rocco Becht, and then the following week, the wheels fell off. They lost to Texas Tech at home, and then they followed that up with a loss to KU.
Right. Right.
So, and to your point on Ward, I see the same thing. He takes over games. It reminds me a lot of Tim Tebow and Cam Newton. How they just it didn't matter who was around. Tebow had talent around.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter. You were just able to make that magic because you could make plays happen.
And Newton, exactly what you're saying. Newton, there's not a single guy on that offense that made it in the NFL besides Cam Newton the year that Auburn won the national. That is wild. That is the definition of exactly what you said. A guy like Cam Ward, Cam Newton that can just take over a game. I'm not saying Miami has no other guys on offense.
No.
They got some players.
But they don't have that caliber. You're not looking at Miami and thinking they are unbeatable. You're not looking at them and seeing these names like you're seeing with other.
Yes.
They're just not flashy. Miami just doesn't. They have decent players. They don't have the flashiest players.
Yep.
Georgia Tech, they only had 99 passing yards that game. Mm-hmm. And
how many running yards do they have?
271 total rushing yards.
Run the ball.
They run the ball. I should have worn my run the ball hat. Where was that defense? Where was that defense? I don't know if it was just bad play calling. Maybe their linebackers, maybe their line wasn't blitzing and getting pressure on the quarterback. Because if you get pressure, you're going to have to open it up a little bit. You're going to have to pass, and if you're stuffing the box. They didn't do anything. They couldn't stop the run to save their life. And Georgia Tech did protect the ball. They only had one fumble that was lost. So, they did protect the ball for the most part. It was Miami's defense that lost that game more so, I think, than Georgia Tech won the game.
That's true. Because I'm a Syracuse fan. So we had a similar game actually against Georgia Tech, ironically enough.
Yeah.
We ran the ball down their throat. We won. But on this, actually, I forget his actual handle, Tommy on X. He's in a lot of spaces with me, and he's a Canes fan. And before this game, I asked him, hey, are you worried about this game? He said, the only thing I'm worried about is the defense. Yeah. It's exactly what happened, like you said. Yeah. So it's crazy. He called it. It wasn't Cam Ward, and he's Cam Ward Heisman, obviously, all day.
Obviously, right.
But like he said, I'm worried if we lose, if it's close, it's going to be because of the defense. Yep. Sure enough.
And it was just all around. It was a terrible effort by the defense. So, credit to Georgia Tech. I'm not taking anything away from Georgia Tech because they still had to execute on offense. They still had to plug those gaps and run the ball. But I think that maybe perhaps against a little bit of a better rushing defense, Georgia Tech wouldn't have had those.
Frank Key's a good coach. I like their coach.
Well, yeah. And it's Georgia Tech is one of those teams where, they're not harmful. Like you can't really hate them. So,
that's true.
Great job.
Have you seen their stadium looks sick in Atlanta?
I haven't seen it. I haven't. No.
It's follow Patient. I'm shouting out other people, but Patience Beach is a really good follow on X. And she's goes to all the Tech games, road and home, and she'll post a lot of pictures of the stadium. But if you haven't seen it, they have a spectacular venue downtown Atlanta. Like you can see the skyline and everything.
Nice.
So it just sucks that they're not better. But I think next year you will see them at least 9 wins.
Well, and when you have these again with the NIL and the money, you have these teams that get these signature wins. Kids become a little bit more interested. Boosters donate a little bit more. So that revenue sharing is that
they just got a 5-star O lineman to your point for the 2025 class committed. We all know
that's committed
as of right now.
Right.
Unless you're Ohio State and you got Jeremiah Smith in the bag.
We'll talk about Ohio State. To me, that's one of the best true freshmen that I've ever seen. He's
impulsively, people were on the Ryan Williams train, and I'm like, Jeremiah Smith is consistently awesome every week. He doesn't need a Hail Mary.
He does not
show out.
No, some of his circus catches have looked like Hail Mary passes too. He's just a freak athlete. So, holds records now at Ohio State as a freshman. And we're not even, we still have 3, 4, 5 more games to go potentially.
Crazy awesome. What was the one he just broke with Chris Carter?
Most touchdown
in a season.
Yeah.
What's I'm sorry putting you on spot. Do you know the career touchdown number?
No, I don't. I don't know what the career touchdown number is. I don't think that he will. Is that? I don't think that he will.
Maybe a running back.
Yeah, I don't think that he will break some of those receiving records. Maybe MHJ, because he's only going to be with us for 3 years. He's now some of the extra games that we have, because we will have extra games with the playoffs now, maybe, but I don't foresee him.
Hey,
some of these records will never be broken just because they're not playing the full 4 years or 5 years.
I agree. It's like 3 and done, and they may not even start freshman year. But Chris Olave holds it for receiver.
Okay, right. And he played. I think Olave played all 4 years.
You're right. And they said he didn't break it until the final quarter against I'm Googling, but final quarter against Michigan State. It's 35. Yeah. David Boston held it all the way until then. With David Boston,
incidentally, a nice guy too. Super nice guy. Yes. Nice. Yeah, that he was on that Rushmore of meeting, and he was just as nice.
Talking OSU history, you remember Sanzenbacher, the receiver?
Sanzenbacher, number 12. Yeah.
So I had a colleague, she's a big Buckeye fan. Her dogs are actually named Brutus and Woody.
Oh, and, I love
it. She was my boss in Jacksonville forever ago. Hey, Lisa. And she could not say the name Sanzenbacher, sorry. But I always used to rag on her because she could not. So it was like Sans was we all those words.
Whatever. I met him too.
Yeah. He was awesome.
Oh, so great. He was so great. It was so fun watching him because you did not look at him and think, oh, there's a star wide receiver. Yeah. So I guess, going into the Big Ten, we can talk about the Indiana UM game. I think that was a test for Indy, and it should not have been. 20. They won. They did what they needed to do. They won. It was sort of akin to me to the Ohio State Nebraska game, where you have these expectations. You're ranked high. You're riding high, and you go in and you everybody just sort of lays an egg. I do think that if Michigan had a better offense, the Hoosiers would have lost. Michigan who has been known for running this year and not passing, they only had 69 rush yards and only 137 in passing. Overall, it was a putrid offensive game. Rourke only had 206 yards. He was 17 for 28. And when they only had 40 rushing yards. So combined, I don't even think they had 500 yards combined. There are teams that are going out and 500 yards in the third by the end of the third quarter. So it was just overall, it was just I think it was a really sloppy offensive game. I don't think it was a great defensive game because the offense was just not good.
It's crazy. They have 103rd best schedule in the country, like ranked Indiana, and they struggle bust with arguably their toughest game yet.
Yeah.
And at Michigan ain't tough this year. Let's be honest.
No,
and they're at home and they struggle bust them by what they win, like 21-16 or something.
Yep. 21 this year or that game, it was 20-15.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at, to your point, like the stats showed it. And like, if you're struggle busting that one, you're not ready for Columbus.
I agree. In Columbus, you're not ready to play Ohio State in Columbus. And okay, it's a noon game, whatever. The noon games are what they are. For my health, I'd rather have a noon game because I don't have to wait all day.
Noon games greater than fall weddings. We can agree on that.
Fall wedding. Do not invite me to a fall wedding on a Saturday. Yeah, don't do. I'm sorry, I'm busy. I'm going to RSVP.
I talked to a South Carolina fan recently, and she said she was actually a bridesmaid or asked to be one at her cousin's wedding. Did not go.
Yeah, is it on a bye week? Then yeah, I could do it. Right. And as long as the prep is on like Fridays, I'm not.
Yeah. Hey, I got to take a quick intermission to do this laptop thing, but I will be back in 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, we can pause real quick for 30 seconds. And just again, everybody, thank you for joining. I appreciate you listening to some of the nonsensical things that I have to say. I know I bombard you a lot with this. So we're going to be doing these every Friday, and this is going to be the format. And then we're going to add a couple of specials. We're going to talk about Rivalry Week, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. And then we're going to preview the college football playoffs. And then we are going to do once they're announced, we're going to do a second preview. So we're going to talk about who we think is going to be in the playoffs. And we're going to talk about who actually is in the playoffs and how we think that they are going to do. So, just going back to what we were talking about, I don't want to hear that it's a hate on Michigan. They're just not having a good season this year. And, maybe with some rebuilding and getting some star players in, Michigan will be better and more relevant in the next several years. But right now they're just not. So Indiana better figure it out before they go into Columbus. And they better not this week. They better not be looking ahead to Columbus, because you don't want to go in. I actually don't want Indiana to come in having lost a game. I want them to come in. I want to get, another signature win. So
that's what it would be. Signature win.
Yeah.
And in Indiana's defense, like, there's people that are like, well, why are they ranked as high as they are? They haven't played anybody, which is true. But you also, they're not second in the country to Oregon just because they're undefeated. They're fifth.
Right.
There's three teams. Penn State's one of them. I don't have the rankings in front of me. And maybe I think Ohio State too. There's a couple of teams that are ranked over them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Penn State is 6. Yeah. Indy is ranked 7th. You can't punish a team for being undefeated and having a weak schedule. It's not the Hoosiers' fault who their athletic director. They're only playing who the athletic director has scheduled. So they're doing everything that they need to do. They are, to me, one of the saddest teams in the sense that they could have one loss this year to a number 2 Ohio State and not make it into a bye, because they will not make it into the Big Ten championship game. It'll be Ohio State and Oregon again. Yep. And that to me is unfortunate, because they're having this magical season and you have one loss to a number 2 team and you don't get into the Big Ten championship. So that to me is, it's just one of those unfortunate things on how strong the Big Ten conference is this year.
Hey, I'm with you. Big Ten. I never thought I'd say it because it's been the SEC until it's not, and technically it still is, but they are on the uptick. I think for me, that I'm just dovetailing, but obviously Ohio State's prominent, Penn State's prominent. They're both blue bloods, both names. But beyond that now, the depth in coaching of this conference has gotten a lot better. It's not just the top two teams and everybody else.
Right.
It's now you have Oregon too. Yeah, they added. So you have Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, but then you have Brett Bielema, Matt Rule, Luke Fickell. This second tier of coaches is not elite, but they're very, very, very good.
They're very good. And people want to play for them.
Right. I'm excited. I'm not saying it's this year.
No,
I don't. Next year, moving forward, like look out long term. Like this is coming, and Brett Bielema specifically, I'm on his train. I have been since Wisconsin. People want to point to, well, he didn't do good at Arkansas, and not talk about how he did amazing at Wisconsin before that.
Right.
It's wild. Like,
Wisconsin was relevant. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They were,
right.
It was Ohio State and Wisconsin.
It was. And you know, the year that we won the national, the first year of the college football playoff.
Yes.
You know, we did wax them that year.
Yeah.
but they were in, and I believe it was the next year. Yeah. So it's always Wisconsin was relevant, and then they weren't. I think we're going to see, you know, these teams, especially now with an expanded playoff, you have a little bit more leeway. You have a little bit more freedom. You can play a little bit less tense, and you know, you have those one or two losses. There's still a potential to get in. So,
are you sold on Luke Fickell?
No, as a head, I wasn't sold on Luke Fickell as a head coach for us. I like him. I think he's a good, you know, he's decently, you know, defensive minded, decently offensive minded. I think that he had a magical year. Was it at Cincinnati?
Yeah.
And I think that he got maybe a little bit too much credit for that. So no, I'm not completely sold on him as a head coach.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
We'll see. He definitely was young and inserted as the interim very abruptly at Ohio State when that Tressel thing happened.
Yes.
Which is also wild because now Tressel would have never been fired in 2020.
He would have never been fired for that. I actually went to that bowl game that we went to the Gator Bowl that year, and we played Florida. And that was right before that was right after they had announced Urban Meyer was coming to Ohio State. And oh boy, that was not one of my better decisions to go to that game because Florida fans were bitter and they beat us. And I'm like, congratulations, you beat us on, you know, one of our worst seasons ever.
Yeah.
And, you know, we got Urban and they did not like that. So that was a rough
I don't fault, for the record, Fickell for that season.
I don't either. It was just a rough time. It was just a really rough period. Yeah. So the last game that I wanted to talk about, you know, briefly touch on, because it definitely wasn't an upset in my eyes, Bama and LSU. So, you know, Bama, they just blew the doors off of LSU. And LSU is just one of those interesting teams to me, like I talked about earlier. They are really, really good until they are really, really bad. And you're going to get a tail, and it doesn't seem to matter who the coach is. If it's, you know, Brian Kelly, Les Miles, you know, you've seen these epic collapses with LSU year in and year out. And, you know, Coach O, truly the only reason Coach O was able to win. I mean, you had jokers. You know, you had the level of talent on that team. If you didn't win a title with that team, you know,
something's wrong.
Yes. So I just, LSU is you know, they're just mediocre. And I'm not going to lie, seeing, you know, Alabama, I am going to say it live in front of everybody on the replay. I was wrong about Alabama. I was very wrong about Alabama. I had them losing 2 or 3 more games, you know, after seeing how they were playing, because there was just something off with Jaden Milroe for me.
Same.
I couldn't pinpoint it. He looked like he was uncomfortable.
Yes.
And I didn't have confidence that he was going to be able to get that back. But Boy.
He has. I don't.
Yes, he has. I mean, all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, Heisman?
Right. I mean, if you had bet $100 on him, let's say when he was down, Vandy down.
Yes,
right?
Vandy.
And then he somehow wins it, like you've paid off your mortgage. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I agree. And I playfully tweeted the other day, Heather, to your point, Kalen DeBoer, I take back everything I ever said about you. I was with you.
I'm sorry, DeBoer, because I was like, boy, did they make a wrong decision. These kids aren't adjusting to his offense. He's not making in-game adjustments. I just didn't know what was going on. So I will fully admit to the Bama fans, I was wrong. This looks like Alabama again.
It's wild. And it's not just this recent LSU game. They look good against Mizzou the week before.
They did. Yes, they did.
And interesting on DeBoer, I heard this a while ago. DeBoer, I didn't realize. So he had Penix, right? And he had Penix actually twice. He had Penix at Indiana as QB. And when he was OC there and quarterback coach, and then he left for Fresno State head coaching job. Then he went to Washington. By that time, the transfer portal was a thing again. So Penix said, well, Tom Allen sucks. Yeah, and I want to go. And he was able to transfer. There's between the lines, he didn't have to follow DeBoer. He chose to follow DeBoer. He knew who his best season to that point was, so he followed him there. Anyways, aside, DeBoer has now intentionally, he didn't coach them all, but so he's had Penix at Indiana with one skill set, Milroe with a totally different dual threat skill set, because Penix was a pure pocket passer. Mainly.
Absolutely.
And then the third one people don't realize, and I didn't either, Jimmy Stein called this out to me. He does Locked On Bama. And before DeBoer had got the job at Bama, because remember, Saban kind of decided a little bit late. Saban decides when Saban decides.
Yes.
And at that point, Will Rogers, former Mississippi State quarterback under Mike Leach, had already committed via the portal to Washington.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
That was DeBoer's decision. That was his guy. Think about all three of those QBs, totally different skill sets. So I say that to say, to your point, I knew this at the beginning of the season. I'm like, okay, he'll work wonders with Milroe, and then he didn't. And then Milroe looked lost. I fully agree. That's what I saw too. But now you're seeing exactly what – and now I'm like, this is actually making sense if you think about it like that. These are three different QBs with three different skill sets. He's able to do it.
Do you think it's more on DeBoer, though? Because Milroe had 4 rushing touchdowns. He had 185 rush yards. So, maybe they're just getting used to each other, and maybe DeBoer is changing a little bit of his coaching style and saying, okay, I was wrong to force this pure passer. He's a dual threat quarterback, and he's got some running back skills. He's got some legs.
I agree. And thank goodness you didn't get Bill O'Brien to stay, because that's exactly what would have happened to you. Right. Thomas Castellanos crushed Florida State on the ground.
Right.
And then he stopped running him. For what reason?
I was absolutely, when Bill O'Brien, I don't even remember that, because it was just like, it was such a relief. I was like, okay, you're gone, and I'm glad. I did not want him at all. I'm going on record.
The only thing I'm positive out of that, Heather, is Sayin followed him to Columbus from Alabama.
Well, right. I agree. And I don't think that Sayin is going to regret that, because I do think that Sayin is going to be our quarterback next year. I think that Sayin will be quarterback, and then I think that I stop recruiting quarterbacks. We don't need them right now because we have Air Nolan.
Will Nolan stay?
I think Nolan will stay one more year.
I'm going to transition inside, but I'm still here. My dog. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm still here.
No, you're totally fine. So I think that Air Nolan will stay. He's redshirted this year. He's not going to see any, so he's got eligibility left. So I think that he's definitely going to. We'll see him.
He's a true freshman, ain't he?
He's a true freshman. Yes.
Yeah.
So he's got some time, and I think that is one thing that Ohio State does, is develop quarterbacks, and you can't tell me any different. I don't want to hear it. We develop quarterbacks now. So.
We agree that the Big Ten is on the up and up as a conference, but I'll say this: if it's still the SEC, Ohio State is an honorary SEC team. That's what they play like.
Well, because they're playing that spread speed, and that's
they look like a contender.
Yeah.
Everybody else, they may be contenders, but there's still question marks.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a question mark in Columbus in 2 or 3 years. You can say what you want to say about that bad game, that Georgia game, whatever, which I agree that stuff that you lost, but you were there. You've been there for a few years now. Michigan can't even say that.
Yeah. No, they can't. They can't. We're in the hunt every year.
That's right.
So there's only really one big game that I want to preview for this week coming up. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of upsets because that's just the way it's been. It's been college basketball, football madness. It has a feel of college basketball to me. So really the only game that's going to be big is I just had it here. What is the game that I wanted to preview?
Tennessee, Georgia.
Just left my head. Yeah, Tennessee, Georgia. Yeah. And again, what we were talking about, I don't think that Georgia wins unless they pull out some miracle, unless they play like they played against Texas. We have a tale of two teams this year with Georgia. We have that team that no one wants to play, that is terrifying, that is firing on all cylinders, and then we have the team that we saw last week. Which team are we going to get? I don't know if there is going to be a letdown now. And now Georgia is playing for their lives. They're playing for their playoff lives. So maybe they do come out and maybe they do throw caution to the wind and run all over Tennessee. I don't know. I don't see it though. Tennessee seems pretty consistent this year, more than I've seen them in the past. But Tennessee also has that, like I had said earlier, they're like an LSU to me sometimes where they have this, they're so good and you're watching them and you're like, dang, this team is really good this year. And then all of a sudden they fall off that cliff when it really hurts them. So which teams do you think we're going to see this week?
Tennessee's going to win. That's what I think. Now the variable is Nico Iamaleava may not play because I guess he's in concussion protocol. So he's questionable as of right now.
Okay.
For that game. If he doesn't play, you have Gaston Moore, a fifth-year backup. So the line last time I saw it was like 9-something in Athens. But either way, I think so A-Train said I'd say Georgia wins since Nico may not play. Georgia, you're right. Tale of two teams, and obviously lately they haven't been playing well. I'll go into it more in detail. I did on my podcast. I did an episode specifically on Carson Beck and his, I'll call it antics, smiling on the sideline, girlfriend pictures, everything kind of combined and what I think it all means. But anyways, I think for this game, that, and you can say agree or disagree on that matters to me. And if it matters to you, if you see that as a negative and a detractor and think that that's a large part of the reason he hasn't been playing as well, he's got 12 interceptions. He leads the SEC.
He does.
So
he does.
That's not a good thing if you're trying to play Tennessee. Tennessee's also closed the gap, let's be honest. Josh Heupel has that program rolling. They were getting shellacked by Georgia the last few years. They're not going to get shellacked even if they lose.
Right.
If Nico does not play, we had it in your chat. Obviously that's a variable. The X factor here is Gaston Moore, though, that backup. He has been under Josh Heupel since Josh Heupel's days as head coach at UCF. So he knows this offense. Mm-hmm. He is a career backup. Don't get me wrong. He is not a Will Howard. He's not an Avery Johnson and currently at Kansas State. He's not a future starter in Julian saying he is a career backup. That's what he is. But one game to get by when you can game plan for that around that is scary for Georgia.
Yeah, you don't need to be great. When you're a backup like that, you don't need to be great, you're all season long. You just need to be great for one game.
Yeah, and Heupel's super smart this year. Heupel is super smart. Dylan Sampson leads the SEC in rushing. But Heupel's supposedly this air raid guy. No, they're truly balanced. And the X factor for them as well is defense with Tennessee. You don't think Heupel and that DC Tim Banks are sitting there salivating right now saying, this is the QB we got to play. We're going to freaking beast. So, yeah, maybe Nico doesn't play, but they are going to be juiced for this game. They have an elite defense that's beyond James Pierce Jr. only this year in Tennessee, and that's been the biggest surprise even for ball fans this year is how nasty that defense has been. They're truly balanced. They have Dylan Sampson, and they have a coach that is smart enough to coach to the strengths and play to the strengths for that game, that individual week. Against Oklahoma when they played them, they knew, Heupel knew they were up like 2 scores and it was second half. He knew, if you remember that game, Oklahoma had no offense. They have a good defense. They have studs on that defense. Offense.
Yeah.
Right. But Heupel knew, okay, we have the ball. I'm not going to throw bombs or passes over the middle deep to risk losing this game. I'm going to manage it.
Yeah.
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 And he did. And that was textbook too, actually, you guys against Penn State. That was poetry.
Yes. It was.
Holy cow.
It was so nice to watch. It was so nice to watch. And Steve said he doesn't see Tennessee winning because Kirby has a way to coach and motivate his team. Yep. Now, let me say that I have said this in the past, and even with the losses, I will stand by this. I don't know if there's a better coach in college who is as adept at making in-game changes as Kirby. Kirby is very good at changing play calling, changing your attack, changing your game plan, but I haven't seen it. I didn't see it last week. And, you know, the fact that you have to go in and you're going to have to motivate your team now to maybe with a Carson Beck, stop being a showman and stop being a social media star and go in and be a quarterback for Georgia who wants to win the national title.
That's right.
I don't like that. I don't like that at all. If you look at the teams, even in Alabama and Ohio State, and I'm going to say it, even in Michigan, Texas, you have all of these stars, and when they're really, really great, and when they're not, they are not on social media spouting off how great they are and look at my life and everything is amazing. And, you know, you'll see them talk about things sometimes and they'll do some subtle, you know, look at what I bought with my money. But by and large, they are team guys. They are never showboating themselves. They're always talking about their teammates. And whether they believe it or not, I don't think that they fully believe it because you can't get to that level. You can't be elite and not have some kind of ego, but they keep it in check and they keep it internal. And I don't think that Carson Beck does that. He's not
loud.
Yep.
On ways you shouldn't be loud.
Yep. Let your play be your.
No, I get it. Like, and I've talked about this, but like, that's most recent moment, if we're going recency bias, when he's smiling on the sideline with 3 minutes to go. We did get context around that Jaden Rashad is his best. What's that?
Yeah. I don't hate that kind of stuff.
Right. But that's singularly, right? And that's like Jaden Rashad's dad came out in his defense, and I think his mom came out in his defense too on social media. I'm like, hey, good for you. Your mom or dad, like, you should support your kid. I get it. They're best friends. However, collectively, everything that's happening,
I agree.
The pictures of the girlfriend,
I agree.
Driving in fast cars, the posting too much overall on social media, the 12 interceptions, like it's all signs that he's not taking it serious.
It's all signs of a further culture problem at Georgia as well. We could do a whole show on the culture problem.
You had me back.
And okay, granted, the Georgia loss still has me a little bitter, but I would still be saying this about any team. You cannot have that many players that are getting arrested and no repercussions really, and they're pretty serious. And then you have a lot of these egos who are not being checked at the door.
In their defense, in that county specifically, I think the county is Cobb County in the Athens area. I could be wrong in the county. Sorry if I am, but they are so unfair with their laws. Like, you can look the wrong way and get arrested.
Right.
So to their credit, however, I agree that's still speeding tickets and violations, and with everything that's unfortunately happened.
Yeah, like it's some of it's pretty serious. Some of the stuff is pretty serious. So I do think that there's a little bit of a culture problem at Georgia, and they need to get that cleaned up.
I think so. It's interesting to your point too on the social media. You're right. Some players, you'll look at their feeds and they are dormant since preseason. You can look at the dates, obviously, of tweets, Instagram, whatever. And to your point, they're not Carson Becking, we'll call it. Mm-hmm. They're like dormant, focused on the season. Mm-hmm. And you're right. That's not every player, all players, but like you have to compartmentalize what works for you. And like, with Carson Beck too, I read a lot between the lines, and I fully agree. Like I really appreciate that comment because Kirby is a master motivator. I listen to him before workouts, pump out easy. How can you not?
Maybe I need to. Maybe I need to start listening to Kirby. I mean, I have.
Yeah, Kirby, you're always working out. I'll send you a locker room.
Yeah, send me some. Epic. Send me some. I could use some.
Yeah. But anyways, so. There was some clips in that game, Heather. Georgia's line, it was like they just didn't even try to block. And Carson Beck, after that game as well, watch his post-game interview. He basically laid the blame at the feet of their offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo.
Absolutely.
So yes. If that, like, I get it. Kirby can motivate all day, but if you're OC in your offense and you don't care and you're giving that more than that vibe, I would say, just showing it and what people are saying, your leading receiver right now, and I get it, they've had off-field stuff that have caused like Colby Young and others to not be on the team. Your leading receiver is a track star, and Arian Smith. He's not a football player. Nope. He's improved as a receiver over the last couple of years, but he's not an elite. He's not a Lab McConkey, So they got problems. They have problems, and I don't think they're going to be motivated.
Fast. They need to figure it out fast. So I think we both agree we have Tennessee. We have Tennessee winning this game. And I have, at this point in the season, I have Georgia out.
For the record, I had Tennessee preseason.
Okay.
So I'm sticking with it.
Okay. All right.
I also have Virginia Tech winning the ACC. That ain't happening.
No, that's not happening. Nope. That's not happening. So we can go into the Ohio State. Obviously, I am an Ohio State girl, Ohio State Northwestern. We don't have to talk about that. We're getting closer to the hour and we can go over, but I wanted to get more into the college football playoffs and see what that looks like right now. The Ohio State, all we have to do is go in and take care of business, not get hurt at Wrigley Field because the bench, I don't know if you saw a diagram of the end zone. I'm like, you're going to have to be really careful on how we're threading those needles in the end zone.
It's tight.
It's really tight. It is really tight.
So it was similar. I remember the Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, Yankee Stadium.
Kind of like that. Okay.
Yeah, it's really tight. So our receivers are going to have to be really careful that they don't get hurt.
All for what? For Northwestern to sell more tickets?
I guess.
You're gonna lose by 50 either way.
I hate to break it to you. Northwestern. No one wants to go watch. No one is going to Northwestern games. Maybe they think that more Ohio State players will go, or Ohio State fans will go. I don't know. I don't know what their theory is on that, but it's not. I don't love this. I don't love this format. Let them play at the stadium like they're supposed to.
Right.
So I have Ohio State by a lot.
Under renovations, right? That Northwestern's permanent stadium. So they've been.
Have they been playing at Wrigley though? I didn't think that they've been. Yeah, I didn't think that
they've been playing at a makeshift, Heather, like on their campus or right off of it because their permanent stadium is under renovation.
But because it's Ohio State, they needed to sell more tickets.
Correct.
And I just don't think at the safety.
Yeah.
And I'm not, you're exaggerating it. Yeah, probably. I don't think anybody's going to get like seriously hurt, but I saw the dimensions and it is tight. It is very tight.
You bring up a good. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, what if, knock on wood, Jeremiah Smith goes full bore?
Correct.
And you're up 25.
You are a Mack truck and you're not going. Or what if a Northwestern player, I'm not saying they're dirty, I'm just saying tempers flare. What if someone gets mad and makes an extra shove out of the end zone? There are all these variables and I don't love it. I just don't love it.
That's going to be like bad news. Like just across the landscape that like, wait, you let this happen. And then imagine, like, I hate to even talk about this on an OSU related show, but like, just if some drastic injury happened where it could have cost them.
We're cooked. We're cooked.
How horrible, because Northwestern didn't want to swallow 20,000 tickets.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at, because at this point in the season, so if I'm Ryan Day, I'm taking out, I have a comfortable lead. I'm building up that lead at the half, and I'm taking out my players in the second half, and I'm resting them. I'm getting ready for Indiana.
I am playing Julian Saying.
No, yeah. Well, Devin Brown is going to go in for a little bit, and then put Saying and air him out.
Brown 2 right now?
Yeah,
he's okay. Hey, thank you for Kyle McCord, by the way. I really appreciate it.
I mean, but do you?
For our standards, yeah.
Yeah, he's been okay. The one game, I haven't watched too many Syracuse games this year, but the one game I watched, he had a little bit of a rough first half.
Was it Pitt?
Yeah.
Worst game of his life. Well, it
was a Thursday night game. I think it was a Thursday night, and I can't remember, it was a Friday night or something that.
Yeah, it was Thursday.
Yeah, and I'm watching, and I'm like, yikes, he's having a little bit of a rough game.
So, I'll ask you this on that, because you guys probably already knew that was coming, because what Pitt did was that looked like the Pittsburgh Steelers steel curtain defense, and but as a Syracuse fan, I didn't watch Ohio State every game last year, so I didn't watch McCord. Yeah. All I knew is this guy went 11-1, and they let him go because of a Michigan loss, is the narrative. No. But then, I see that performance against Pitt, and I'm like, when he got pressured at Ohio State, was that what happened? He just kind of deer in headlights?
I think our defense kept us in the games last year. He had Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
Yeah, he had Marvin Harrison Jr. He had, I think he had Julian Fleming that year, last year, or that year.
He had Ibuka too.
He had Emeka, but Ibuka was hurt quite a bit. Yeah. He did have Emeka Ibuka, and that's why he was bailed out by his players. Yeah.
Oh,
so that was typical. That was what we saw, and that's why we wished him well.
Yeah.
Didn't hate the guy. But, good luck.
For Cuse, it works. I'll take it still. Yeah. I mean, you give me any quarterback 11-1 at a Big Ten school.
Oh, I agree. Because he still has talent. He just wasn't the quarter. And he was one of the players that I had actually talked about where the transfer portal works, because he just wasn't the guy for Ohio State. Ohio State wasn't the offense for him. Wasn't the stage for him. So
he has a good relationship with Fran Brown too, the Syracuse head coach. I think they've known each other since high school or something.
Oh, okay.
And the families know each other. So it'd be good for both sides, and he'll be back next year, because I think at this point, like you said, against Pitt especially, he showed that he's not ready for that draft. So
we have the second week of the college football playoff brackets. A little bit changed. Georgia is no longer in the brackets now. So this is who we have. And for those of you who were not listening last week, shame on you. For those of you who weren't listening last week, we talked about the difference between rankings and seeding. So I won't get into it in depth, but really quickly here, rankings versus seeding. So you have your ranks. So you have your 1 through 12, how they're ranked, but then you have your seedings. So the top 4 are going to be your conference winners. So regardless of where they are ranked, if they win their conference, they're going to have an automatic bye, and they're going to be a 1 through 4. So BYU is the example. They are not ranked above Ohio State, but they would get a bye in the first round because they will have won their conference. And right now, as it stands, Ohio State would have the 5th seed because they will not have won their conference. We'll see. How. I don't want to talk about that right now. I want to get through Indiana. So right now, the way it's looking is you have in the seeding, you have Oregon, you have Texas, you have BYU, and you have Miami, who are all projected to win their conference. So they get a top 4 seed, which means they get a bye. Then you have number 5, Ohio State, 6, Penn State, 7 is Indy. You have number 8 at Tennessee, number 9, Notre Dame. You have 10th is Bama, 11th is Ole Miss, and then you have Boise State. So the bracket would look like Boise, Ohio State playing, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Penn State, and Alabama and Indiana.
Yep.
So do you have any surprises in there? Do you have any like, they shouldn't be in there?
The round 1 game surprise, like I'm still not on the Marcus Freeman train with Notre Dame.
I'm not either.
Okay. All
nope.
right. Yeah.
Nope. He's proven time and time again that he cannot win the big game.
Well, yeah, that's true. And even
and they don't have a conference. And they don't have a conference.
Yeah. Fair.
You know, for all of you, we're talking about Notre Dame.
The past 2 years, like they lost to Marshall last year and Northern Illinois this year, 2 Group of 5 schools back-to-back years.
Right.
He just lost Deuce Knight as his quarterback commitment for 2025 to Auburn.
Yep.
Now he has rebounded nicely, which I've been surprised by. They do have a quality win against A&M. Granted, it was week 1. That would be the team for me, and then Indiana too. So I think what's going to happen with Indiana is once you shellac them, which we talked about, I think will happen. They're going to dovetail. Now that luckily for them, they play Purdue, who's atrocious and probably going to fire their coach after 2 years in the last game of the season. So that's good for them. But aside, I still think that Ohio State loss is going to show. They technically, what you said, I think they showed themselves already, only beating Michigan by 5 at home. So I think they're just going to continue to dovetail and get throttled by Alabama if these games were to happen now.
I agree. There are a couple of interesting matches that the Boise, Ohio State, I do think that Ohio State would handle Boise. Yes. I do. Yeah. And I think the committee is going to do everything that they can to keep Alabama in that lower bracket, because if Alabama stays at 10 or 7, they would end up playing Texas in the next round.
Yeah.
And I do think that the committee does look at potential matchups for the next round.
Yeah.
Because, they have Ohio State at number 5. Oregon is at number 1. Ohio State would not play Oregon again until the semifinals. So it's the way it's crisscrossing right now. I think Tennessee would beat Notre Dame. I think OSU would beat Boise. I think Ole Miss would beat Penn State at this point, because I don't think Penn State has a potent enough offense.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, and then I think that I would have Alabama over Indiana.
That Ole Miss one's interesting. I just thought about this recently. Keandre Lambert-Smith, remember him you probably remember him from last year. He was Ohio State's number 3 receiver. And
who did you say?
Keandre Lambert-Smith, or KLS.
Yeah.
So he transfers to Auburn. He's leading Auburn in receiving. He's going to have over 1,000 yards receiving this year, despite their lackluster season. And I just started thinking, wow, that's why he transferred from Penn State, because he knew Franklin wasn't going to give him any chance at developing even further. I mean, he's now a standout number 1 receiver on an SEC team. So to your point, and you saw that against Ohio State, I thought that was an awesome game to watch. But aside, Penn State had no offensive firepower. Yep. Drew Aller still looks like Drew Aller.
He does. He does.
They had their run game was supposed to be their strength. Jim Knowles shut that down.
Yes, he did.
And Ole Miss too. Granted, it was a bowl game that wasn't part of the playoff, but Ole Miss did roll Penn State last year with the same starting quarterbacks, plural, both presumably going to be back in this season. And Ole Miss also brings back Trey Harris and Caden Prescorn that were part of that equation. Considering what we said about Ole Miss, I think they roll them.
So do I. And Penn State has a decent defense, but you can't have your defense out on the field a disproportionate amount of time to your offense. Right. And I just don't see Penn State being able to control the clock. Not against any of these teams. Maybe a BYU, I maybe a Boise. I don't know. I'll be completely candid, I haven't watched enough of BYU or Boise to know where their strengths or weaknesses are. I'm going to have to look into that because they're obviously going to make it into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the Penn State Ole Miss game. I actually think that the Alabama Indiana game would be a blowout, if I'm being completely honest with you as well.
Fully. Yeah, fully. Kalani Sitake at BYU has surprised me because he was borderline hot seat this year. Mm-hmm. And that's how wild, to your point, this year has been. Like, so many upsets. And in week 1, or week 2, you thought SMU losing to BYU was a massive upset. BYU is still undefeated.
Correct. Correct. That's and I think that it's the same when it was the BCS. It's that lose early mentality. That lose early helps you because you have the benefit of hindsight. So if you lose to a BYU early in the year, if you lose to an Indiana early in the year when they're not ranked as high, but then you go back and you look at their body of work and you don't look at where the teams were ranked at the time they lost. You look at where the teams are ranked at the time you're trying to evaluate who makes it into the playoffs. So you do have that benefit of hindsight. Let's say Ohio State had gone in and lost to Oregon by 1, and then Oregon goes and loses every single game after they play Ohio State. That loss now is going to look like garbage. But but Oregon is rolling and they're undefeated and they look unstoppable, and we only lost to them by 1. So that loss looks like a quality loss. Like you want to call that a quality loss or a quality win. So you have that benefit to me of hindsight, of looking back and seeing, okay, this is where they were when we played them, but look at what they've done since then. And their stock just keeps going up. So
yeah, fully agree.
Well, I was there. Let's see what Army may or may not do against Notre Dame next week. And yeah, I agree. I don't think Army is going to. It was really exciting at the beginning of the year to see the service academies playing so well. You had Navy, who was undefeated. You had Army, who had only lost 1 game, I think it was. But I just think that their strength of schedule shows when they play against better caliber teams. Are they better than they've ever been in the past? Yes. Do we love seeing Army and Navy roll and these service academy teams roll? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that they would have a chance against any of the teams that, I've talked about? Unfortunately, I don't. I wish that I could say I think that Army was going to go in and roll over Notre Dame. I just don't see it.
Army's undefeated.
Army's undefeated.
Yeah. Navy was too, though. So until recently, now Navy's up.
They lost to Notre. Was it Navy that lost to Notre Dame as well? And they lost.
Yeah, they got blown out.
Yeah.
What I learned, though, I didn't know this because I thought Navy would have a better time with them. Their quarterback Horvath, who's had a great year at Navy, his hand was broken during that game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or not hand, maybe like fingers, something.
Yeah, something was broken.
So,
okay.
Yeah, like if you remember now, he was fumbling the ball all over the place.
He was. Like, it was just a sloppy game, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not saying they would have won because of that.
But maybe they would have put up a better fight.
Army's a good team, though. Like Bryson Daly, their quarterback, he's a Tim Tebow. I mean, he is a bulldog playing quarterback. He's amazing. It's just he's at a service academy, so you don't get looked at. He's a more athletic Diego Pavia, if you want to give him another example there. Guy's a dog. Army as well. I'm a little bit team Army. I don't think they're necessarily going to win the game. I do think it's going to be really close, unlike Navy. I think it's unfair to compare the two, in my opinion, because of what – and also I have the benefit of, like, I did watch Army last year with Bryson Daly at quarterback because they played in Syracuse.
Yeah.
So, but they also, like – what got me is Bryson Daly was out, I think, 2 weeks ago against Air Force. They just played North Texas and beat them 40-3 or something crazy. 2 weeks ago at Air Force, they played at Air Force without Bryson Daly, and they won that game pretty handily. Not as impressive as they would have with him, but that to me is a good sign that they're a good team.
Yeah, that they're still winning even without him. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you remember, Heather, this was like probably 5-10 years ago. They had the same head coach in Jeff Monken. They took Michigan to double overtime or something.
I know. I remember that. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a different offense because this year they're not running that triple option like straight up in different time period, obviously, but we'll see. I don't. The other thing too, context for people, this Army Navy game on like December 2nd or whenever they play annually.
It's their rivalry, but I think they're a week after the rivalry week, right? They get their own time slot every day.
So that is actually, that doesn't count. So
no,
let's just say, okay. I didn't know if everybody knew that. Like, so like,
I'm glad you're mentioning it.
Okay. Conference championship game, if in theory for the AAC, Navy and Army meet up, that counts, obviously.
Yes.
That game is like an exhibition then.
Yeah, it's friendly. It's like for pride, right? It's Army versus Navy. Yeah.
That sucks in a way. I'm like, man, that's gonna be awesome to watch. Like,
well, and it's the wear and tear on their bodies, and they're playing for pride. I am contractually obligated to root for the Navy because my father was in the Navy. He was in the Navy during Vietnam, so I have to root for Navy. So,
the interesting on that though, and I appreciate Train bringing that up, Heather. What if? This is another what if? What if Army is undefeated at that time? What if what if they beat Notre Dame? What if they win the AAC? Then if you're Army, do your players sit? That is a massive game for pride for both sides. Players, fans. Would you sit your starters?
No, I don't think the starters would stand for that because you don't go to an Army or a Navy to make it into the playoffs. You don't. You go there for that reason. So no, I think they play.
Very fair. I respect that for sure. I feel half guilty asking it.
No, it's a valid question. It's a valid question because of the landscape of college football now.
But actually, sideline season's account for Army, he was on a space I did. He said the exact same thing you did. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's what it should be about. You shouldn't have, what was it? Nick Bosa said, "Oh, I'm hurt. I'm not going to play the entire season." Like, come on. And he's not the only one. I hate to call that out, but
he's not the only one. But now, I mean, unless you're in the playoffs, you're going to see a lot of these kids sitting out these bowl games. Don't mean anything anymore.
No, they never have. No. Like, it's like,
it's worse now than it ever has been. Aside from the New Year's Six Bowl, they never really meant anything. So the Rose Bowl used to mean something. The Fiesta Bowl used to mean something. The Orange Bowl used to mean something. But now, if you're not in playing for a national title, it just doesn't mean anything anymore.
So, I know we've gone long, but an idea I heard and that I like, and I had too, is to not fix these bowl games, but to make it more appealing. What if, because 98% of college kids enroll early now, right, in the spring. Mm-hmm. Or high schoolers.
Right.
What if you made them eligible to play?
In. Yeah, I agree.
Because they're practicing anyways. They're on the practice. But Julian Sayin was actually practicing bowl prep for Alabama.
He was. I agree. Put them in, and they're still going to keep their eligibility because you're allowed to have X amount of starters.
Jeremiah Smith showing out before the season, like get your hype. Like get them a trial run.
And then you're going to get them that experience. They're going to have that experience in a big game and what it is like to play in front of a crowd that they've never played in front of before.
And you put a disclaimer on that, Heather, to your point. You say, however, if it's a playoff game, those early recruits cannot play.
You can't play. You can't play. Right. Yeah. Right. Because we're still in that. Yes, I agree.
Right.
I agree. You make it more of an exhibition match. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how, and
well, and maybe you'll get you'll get some viewership. Maybe you'll get some more views. Because who watches? I don't watch, the Craft Feed the Hunger.com, bowl. I don't watch that. I'm not going to watch the Tidy Bowl. I'm not interested in it.
Like, those Under Armour All-American games, high school, more people watch that than those.
I love the Army, the All-American, and I love those. I love those.
So this is essentially what that would be. Yep. And you're just getting a sample size. To your point, I absolutely agree. The ratings would be much higher.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that so many guys are sitting out, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and I know we went a little bit longer, but thank you for everyone for sticking around with us and watching and the participation. Pete, this was, hands down, one of the best shows. I am so incredibly glad that you decided to join me. I hope that you would accept the invitation to join me again. This was great. Please remind us again where we can find you and where we can subscribe and where we can read your articles and all of the amazing things that you're doing. Thanks.
Find my articles, what Heather just put there, SaturdayBlitz.com. I just wrote a few recently on Ryan Day, and I'm Team Ryan Day for the record.
I am too. I am too. I'm not, in no way, shape, or form am I ready to have him let go.
The guy's got on par winning percentage with Urban, and also the recruiting. I did the recruiting rankings average-wise for their tenures are parallel.
Yeah, and I'm going to go on record and I'm just going to cut the bullshit out on Jim Knowles too. Mm-hmm. He's a defensive guru. He's a defensive god. No one is firing Jim Knowles either. So just cut that out too.
You know how many teams would love to have 10 wins a year?
Yeah.
Hi, exactly. Syracuse fan in the chat.
Exactly.
Hi, fan that did not get Marvin Harrison Jr., even though Marvin Harrison Sr. went to. You know how sad that is? That's how bad we are, Heather. Legacies go where their fathers usually went.
They do.
We didn't have a sniff on that guy. We weren't even third or fourth in the running. That's how bad we are.
No.
So, anyways, at Big Skin PD is my X handle, and you find me there. And I think I just posted the YouTube channel. I just started up there, but definitely watch Heather's first. She's in it to win it. So thank you, Heather. I appreciate it.
You can check us. You can check us both out. So just as a closing, don't forget to check us out on YouTube at Bougie Sports, online at bougiesports.net. Don't forget to follow me, Love Buckeyes, and join me next Friday when we preview the Indiana game, and I will get all of that stuff out on X. So follow all of us and comment, watch us on the replay, and thank you all for watching us live and sitting here listening to us talk about some of our favorite topics. So have a wonderful Friday and go sports.
See ya.